Good afternoon. I'm Ed Pozzuoli, president of Tripp Scott, and with us today we are really honored to have our friend, the CFO of the state of Florida, Jeff Atwater. Jeff, welcome.
Welcome. Thanks, Ed. Good to be back.
Well, I got to tell you, Florida's economy is really doing great. And compared to some other states, other parts of the country, tell us a little bit about the role and some of the policies that you and your fellow cabinet members up at the state, kind of imposed on Florida.
Sure, Ed. It's such a good question here, and I really think that to understand it is its really basic sense is, it's how you see the problem. In 2009, everybody was on their knees. All 50 states, every county, school district, everybody was on their knees. But so was the private sector.
Right.
And so if you woke up each morning as a government elected official responsible for trying to help make a difference, and your orientation was, we have a huge problem on our books and we're going to solve our problem, instead of waking up in the morning and saying the private sector is really struggling and stressed, what conditions can we modify that could improve the likelihood of their recovery at the earliest possible moment and for an enduring period of time? Right. And that's how Florida made its choices, but it's not how our peer states, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, California, Ohio, Pennsylvania.
Give us a couple of examples of where we differed from some of those states.
We went after 4 specific initiatives. Could we bring down our spending, therefore reduce our taxes at this point? We went through and made a list. What's required right now and what's desired? Everything on the desired list, although worthy, had to be put aside. Not now. We had to reduce our spending $6 billion to meet where the new run rate of revenue was. But other states said, that's a gap, we have to fill it, instead of saying, no, it's not a gap, we have to reduce our spending. That was huge. That left billions of dollars in the hands of the marketplace, so that when they got their feet on the ground, they could start moving. The second,
and before we leave that point,
sure.
In other states, they filled the gap by increasing taxes.
Between 2009 and 2014, 43 states chose to, at a minimum, increase taxes by at least $100 on a per capita basis. Most were $500, $1,000, $1,500.
But Florida went the opposite way.
Florida was the only state. They solved their problems in 2 ways. 43 states raised their taxes. 30 states increased their debt. 26 states did both. Only 1 state would do neither. Florida was the only state in that window, when it was really tough, that said, we're going to reduce our taxes, we're going to reduce our debt, let every dollar stay in the private market sector, in the private sector hands. They'll create the job. And so that was
that's one. That was the point.
So taxes was one, reducing debt was the second. Don't burden new interest carry on the backs of everybody right now. Just hold debt where it's at. If we can, begin to pay it down. And we paid down $4 billion in that window.
What did that do to the credit rating of the state?
Well, this is where it was really important, because in 2009, though we had a AAA credit rating, Standard & Poor's put us on a negative outlook, saying probably within 6 months to a year, we're going to have to downgrade you. Well, the difference in borrowing money between a AAA state and a AA state could be about, this isn't perfect, but about 1/4 percentage point. Now, when we have $24 billion outstanding,
right,
that's a lot of money. New York has a state budget twice our size with less citizens. They have twice our debt with fewer citizens. If New York right now had our debt service, our debt ratio in our credit rating, they would save $1.3 billion a year just in interest every single year. That's
so the difference between their credit rating and our credit rating would have saved them
$1.3 billion every year just in their interest carry every year, Ed, not just this year. And as I was about to say, it's 37,000 teachers they could have funded. That's 65 elementary schools they could have built with that money. So the decisions we made were, if we could bring down our debt, if we could build up our reserves instead of creating new programs and spending that money. The S&P looked at that and said, wow, Florida made quick decisions, hard decisions. They reduced their spending, they reduced their obligations. Let's take them from negative back to stable. We preserved our AAA credit rating. It was a phenomenal victory for the people of Florida.
And a long-term savings.
A huge long-term savings. And the other 2 points would have been taxes, debt, and the next would have been litigation reforms to try to reduce the likelihood that small business owners would on a daily basis find themselves with litigation issues. That was tort reform issues.
Right.
So with significant tort reform issues. And then fourthly was reducing regulation. Could we go through every single agency and make them go look at the regulatory schemes of their agencies for licensing, permitting, whatever it was, and see if you could scale this back. Not to something that would be put the consumer at risk or at danger, but could we not just work more reasonably? And we've reduced 10% of all the regulations that were on the books in the state of Florida. So regulatory reform, litigation reform, tax reform, and bringing it down our outstanding debt.
The 4 points that you mentioned with respect to the state of Florida,
Yeah.
do you believe that those 4 things contributed to the 49 months of consecutive job growth and the robust housing sales and the GDP, which is growing at 2.7%? I mean, all those things.
Yeah, unquestionably, because you lay all 50 states side by side, and when we made our decisions, New York raised taxes, Illinois raised taxes, California raised taxes, New Jersey raised taxes. They all raised their debt. And you see the movement of household income flowing to Florida. So in the last 10 years, we have received $64 billion of household income that wasn't here 10 years ago.
Right.
It left New York, it left New Jersey, it left Ohio, it came here. It's driving our economy. $65 billion of new household income moving to Florida, departing and fleeing these other states. That's significant to their ability to maintain their economic strength.
So let's switch gears now. Florida's future. How do you see the economic future of Florida, particularly as it relates to your being CFO?
Yeah, it looks very good. And I, from coming from the private sector before stepping
Right.
into this role,
Right.
what I always looked at was the ability of any industry player that had the capacity for growth. Did your manufacturing plant have room for growth, or were you at full capacity and running inefficiently? Well, look at this now. Florida has the AAA credit rating. We have the unemployment rate down to 5%. We have a population growth rate now running over 2%, 365,000 people this year. We have plenty of capacity to borrow if we so choose. We have the lowest tax rate per capita than any state in the country other than New Hampshire. All of our ratios are now in perfect condition. So we can set ourselves out to be more flexible, more agile, where our competing states are burdened with debt, their taxes are already high, they have nowhere to turn to solve their current problems. So we feel very good about the future of Florida. The question, I think, for us is now, in this time of some economic improvement and strength, how do we diversify this economy for the longer haul? So when the next cyclical time comes, which it surely will,
Right.
that the times will not be as difficult for Floridians, that job growth will not be a significant issue as it was this past time. So while we'll still champion tourism and agriculture and construction and growth, we must look to energy, to life sciences, to technologies of other kinds, to continue to diversify and create a more manufacturing-driven environment in Florida than we have today.
It's like some of the incubator areas that we're talking about, like in Miami-Dade or even here in Broward.
Exactly right. What can we do to continue to create
the Max Planck Center up in Palm Beach?
Max Planck,
Right.
Scripps Research
Right.
Institute, bringing those life science, that intellectual capital to Florida, in creating longer-term industries that will manufacture here, will sustain themselves here, and will not move with the cycles.
So the legislative session is coming up next week.
It is.
And I'm certain that you're happy you're CFO. But what are some of the legislative agenda items that you'd like to see the legislature take up?
We have a couple, and they're a little consumer driven. Actually, they're significant consumer driven. But one, the life insurance companies that have historically not had to make a significant effort to find people that had a life insurance policy, that maybe now it's time for the beneficiaries to gain the benefit of that contract. We're looking for ways to help them use new tools so they can hook up with those families faster, and those people get the benefit of that. We're looking at balanced billing issues where doctors and insurance companies don't put the consumer in the spot of having to pay a bill because they couldn't agree on the charge. So those are the things that we're working on. But most importantly, again, is our legislature this year will be the fiscal discipline of coming in. We're anticipating $1.3 billion in new revenue over last year. That'll be the most revenue that has ever come into the state of Florida. The governor has laid out the marker. Don't spend it all. Let's give a significant dollar back to the private sector for greater job creation. Let's take what we will take and be disciplined with it. And I think if we can avoid where other states have, every new bit of revenue has become a new government program, put some of that in reserves, pay down some debt, give some of that back to the consumers and the small business owners, they'll keep this economy and this engine growing.
Well, with that, I wanted to thank you. I mean, our time is up, but I really wanted to thank you for taking the time, and thank you for your service, continued service to the state of Florida.
Always a pleasure, Ed. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
You bet, man. Thanks.
All right.